Good evening and welcome to the City of Topeka Planning Commission meeting. We are a commission approved by the mayor and city council to plan for the orderly growth and development of the community, to hold public hearings and to make recommendations to the city council on planning items. There are no hearings tonight. Staff will present on the downtown master plan. Chris, will you please take the roll?
Okay, Mr. Armstrong.
Here.
Mr. Dean.
Here.
Mr. Freed. Let's see here.
Sorry, here.
Mr. Kennard.
Here.
Here. Mr. Kalp.
Here.
Ms. Ringler.
Here.
Mr. Warner.
Here.
Ms. Messina and Ms. Lawson are not logged on, but I am expecting them. So I'll mark them present when and if they are able to join. We have 7 and a quorum.
All right, thank you. First item this evening, approval of minutes from May 18th. Probably the most minutes on one single topic that went unresolved that I've seen in a while.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I move approval of the minutes as submitted.
Second.
Motion and a second for approval. Any further discussion? All right, Chris, will you please take the roll?
Okay, Mr. Armstrong.
Aye.
Mr. Dean.
Aye.
Mr. Freed.
Aye.
Mr. Kennard.
Aye.
Mr. Kalp.
Aye.
Ms. Ringler.
Aye.
And Mr. Warner.
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0.
All right, thank you. Our main discussion item this evening, presentation and discussion on the downtown master plan with a focus on Civic, River to Rail, and River South. Mr. Finder, who's going to lead us through this journey this evening?
Mr. Chair, I will do most, well, actually, I'll do the first 2 districts and then pass it over to Dan Warner for the last one. We are in the midst of, as you know, a series of visions for the future of downtown and the physical land use guide to implement our market study. You had been presented a couple of these districts, I think a month or 2 ago, and seems like a long time ago, but it probably wasn't. And so we have 3. That sounds like a lot, but we are gonna get through these at a fairly high level, and we want to keep you up to date because I suspect that, well, I know we will come back to you ultimately with a full document, but we just want to keep you in the loop as we go along here. And I'm going to share my screen, move this forward. Okay. I hope everybody can see my screen. If not, let me know. Okay, so I'm, again, every time I go through this, I don't know how much you know or I've gone over, so I apologize for repeating some of it. I just have a brief intro before we get into the districts. As you probably remember, the reasons behind the update of the downtown master plan are really to figure out a kind of the next generation of investment. We are the current generation, which is a lot of the improvements that you've seen, the public-private partnerships that happened on Kansas Avenue between 6th and 10th, and the and all the private investment into the buildings and the spaces that have gone along there. That's kind of the current generation, if you will. And so Downtown Topeka Inc. did a market study of which that was completed last year. And that's kind of where we picked up. So this market study, which I've presented to you in the past, to sum it all up, we really don't have, it says we really don't have enough development opportunity to reinvest in all of areas of downtown that need reinvestment today. So the plan is intended to guide those investments in a carefully and targeted way to increase our chance of success. So we are trying to align a lot of what is the market potential in downtown for the first 10 years. And that includes, as you can see here, the 900 housing units and the supportable retail, office, and hospitality in new rooms. So this is the first 10, this is within the next 10 years. This is what the market study had indicated is supportable. And so we're trying to put a land use plan together based on where those things would fall and land best, knowing we can't fill up the entire downtown with those numbers. So our overarching framework is what we refer to as districts and hubs. The districts, there's 10 districts which build off of market study. We've tweaked them a little bit, added one here or there, and renamed a couple just to better illustrate what their area is for. So the districts would complement one another. They would not compete with one another. And that's kind of the intention of being strategic. We don't want to duplicate what we've done in the historic district. In another district, we don't have as much of that demand, but we have different types of demand that we could satisfy throughout the other districts in downtown and be complementary. We would tie that together with a corridor or a pedestrian corridor that would tie those districts together along Kansas Avenue. Kansas Avenue would be our spine, and it would be connected through a series of 5-minute walks with spatially separated activity hubs. That big star in the middle, for instance, the red outline star, I can probably point to it, is the New Evergy Plaza. So that kind of becomes a de facto center of Kansas Avenue now. But this area, just again, to refresh your memory, goes on the south, pretty much the 12th on the south, and Noto across the river to the north. That's the extent of our downtown boundaries. Also Topeka Boulevard to the west, and then the rail yards to the east. You also will see here is the new or future alignment of I-70 through downtown. Okay, so jumping in the Civic District, that's our first of 3 districts we want to overview tonight. Civic, as the name, well, let me get you the boundaries first. So on the east would be the rail yards. It's between 6th and 10th, and then on the west would be Quincy. Within that district right now are a number of already local government type uses, from City Hall to Shawnee County Courthouse to the transit authorities, Quincy Street Station, to other city offices and the jail. So there's quite a number of functions already there. And what we see happening in the future would be sort of an infill opportunity to create more of a local government campus that unifies a lot of the city county transit operations. There are some surface parking lots in the area that are in the shadows of the county jail facilities, which, as you would expect, are very difficult to attract private investment to. So we can look at them as using them for what they are now, which is for the extra parking areas. We also have one block that is many of you identified as, or would identify as a blighted area. That's the vacant abandoned hotel to the south of the jail, the Red Carpet Inn. So these are some marginalized areas, but could be very highly valued if we could relocate any expansion, any needs for public facilities or their growth. Oops, no, that's right. Okay, so one of this, we do a kind of a mock-ups, some future scenario planning here. So one vision that we're sharing tonight would kind of sizes up the area to see if a couple larger facilities would fit. We talked, the last time we talked, we mentioned the need or the potential for the law enforcement center at 4th and Kansas to become a catalytic site for a convention center hotel. So carrying that forward, we've looked at could you fit the needs of that law enforcement center within this district. It would be a great complement. We show that right now as, and that's number one on this map. Number one is where the current Red Carpet Inn is, that block. That actually shows a little larger idea for a combined justice center. It's not just the police and sheriff, but we are starting to explore whether or not you could actually do include the court system, both the municipal and district courts in there. We know there are some space needs with the county. City's always had a desire to upgrade, separate that court facility. So that kind of idea we're beginning to explore and to see if it, first of all, is that something that all the stakeholders would prefer, and then does it fit in the area? Certainly from a use standpoint, I think it would. So you have that idea. You also have it back here. We'll jump over across the jail to what is a current city parking lot. Number 3 there is a Topeka Metro Transit Authority. They are actually doing a current relocation study for their riverfront facilities to see if this would be an appropriate and suitable spot for them. And so that actually, they're doing a study, and we should have more information here in the next few weeks, to be quite honest. So that's kind of the flavor for the Civic District. Some larger type uses that can open up spaces that can be more catalytic for the community, and take care and absorb some of those marginalized parcels and spruce up or really completely do a 180 with the blighting influences that are along that gateway there. So that's kind of the idea behind the Civic District. Let's see if and these are just some illustrations of what we were referring to. Nothing, this is absolutely no, just visual representations of the Justice Center and also of the Transit Authority to have some higher level design in the area that can, again, transform the gateway here and create some efficiencies and partnerships that aren't there right now. There is one kind of unique building in the area that we're trying to figure out the best uses. We've talked to some interested parties that are, this is the old, on the left there is the old city, city, it's not the fountain, it's Ironworks, City Ironworks. That building is one of the few, it's certainly of biggest industrial heritage buildings that we have in all of downtown right now. And it's laid out there to maybe transform that into an entertainment venue down the road. So that would be a bit of an anomaly in the area, but it probably is an architect's dream. I won't speak for our architects on the board, but pretty cool site to figure out what to do with. Okay, so we're going to slide to the north from the Civic District and go north of 6th into what is traditionally would be what you would think of as our traditional industrial area. We're calling it River to Rail. It was called Warehouse and Innovation, probably the last time you saw this presentation. A lot of the innovation part of that district is being, was really being absorbed more into the River South area. So it didn't make much sense. And this really is dominated by a lot of the industrial uses literally between the river and the rail yards. Some large footprints, Hill's Pet Nutrition, the old Hallmark building, certainly the BNSF operations, a lot of, and plus a lot of what I would consider more urban renewal era landscape where the buildings are post 60s and 70s. So it's medium scale industry, a lot of service stuff, lot of laundry facilities. So you have just a smattering of a couple old buildings in the area that could be reused and with the creative entrepreneur. And one of those is pictured there on the bottom there, which is on BNSF's property. I've been told that Cyrus Holiday handed out paychecks there. I haven't nailed that down quite yet, but some really cool history in some of these buildings in the area, but those are more anomalies. So the influence of the area will be determined a lot by what happens with Polk Quincy design. We get into it a little bit here. So the map which shows you the future Polk Quincy footprint in black there. The blue line is just showing you what is considered now the Kansas Avenue, what would be the future Kansas Avenue exit, which starts way back closer to 6th, I believe. So that follows all the way through on what is kind of a frontage access road that parallels the main line and comes to Kansas Avenue. So a lot of what we're now working on with KDOT, as since many, well, we may not have told you this in our meetings, but you probably heard that Polk Quincy was selected by the state to go into the development phase, which means, or development pipeline. That means for us, it would be finalizing the design on Polk Quincy. So in the next year, we'll do just that as a city, as a state, and we'll get more into that. One of the things that they've asked us to look at was some potential scope reductions to again, help accelerate the project, really. It's a $230 some million phase that would be from around 4th Street west, and the viaduct, the bridge, would be the first part of that first phase. So it's a rather significant cost in the overall program for the state. So we've looked at a couple of different options here, and I'm not going to get too heavy into detail here. Just know that we're looking at what would be what could open up this river to rail area a little more in terms of some development sites. We'd still maintain access at 4th Street. We may look at trying to divert some of that frontage road paralleling the main line more through our existing grid system by way of Madison and 1st Street. So there are a couple different options in KDOT's current design. I'm circling this. 1st and Kansas is closed. I should say Kansas is open. 1st is closed at that intersection in their current design. So and you'll hear from Dan here in a second, but we've heard from people down here, they would like to see that remain open. And maybe if we don't do these frontage roads as much, we would actually create some more room for future development sites and not have to buy out as many properties and businesses and relocate them. So a significant amount of savings that could, again, accelerate the project more and make it more doable. The city did approve $20 million worth of bonds in a couple weeks ago to use in the next 5 years, to use for either right-of-way purchase, design, or a combination of improvements. We really just needed to have some local match to help, again, spur the development along and move it into that construction phase. So I'll move off of that and show you kind of the rendering of what, if those design alterations were made, you can begin to see a more of a intersection rebuild at 4th and Madison, 1st and Madison, and certainly at 1st and Kansas, which is in the River South. We also would open up an area that is now just parking across from Hallmark for potential development as well in the district. And everybody's favorite, we're still looking for that magical building for a distillery. I'm sure everybody just cannot, if you know anything about distilleries, you need to jump on this idea here. We just threw that in there because we got some really cool buildings, and if you've seen the distilleries in Kansas City, how they took advantage and reused some of those buildings, it could be done here as well. Okay, that's kind of the lay of the land for the river to rail. Again, traditional, industrial, not land use wise. It's not going to increase our housing count, although there is a couple housing conversion buildings in the area. It's not intended for that new neighborhood or new residential area. It's not intended for hotel, new office, or much retail. So it's more light industrial for the most part. Okay. Oh, and there's a couple of those buildings I was talking about. This is already the 404. warehouse across from the Hallmark building. We also have the old, what is the old bakery building. It was Jayhawk Express. It's Snacks. But it's a long linear group of buildings over near the Amtrak station, which has a lot of potential for reuse as well. We've included some ideas for First Street median improvements. There was a wide swath of median that housed a rail line for many years. That was recently taken up by a utility project. So you have a pretty good chance to really beautify that landscape along there, maybe even provide some parking. But if we are to use First Street as one of those routes for getting through the area and back onto I-70, that would be a lot of, you would have some potential to do that there. And we kind of keep track of how much we're meeting from a housing, retail, hotel, office standpoint. Probably a little more housing just because of some of the conversions that could go on there, including the hotel that's in the area of the Ramada. Okay, we're going to slide over to the west on the river south. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I'm going to allow Dan to take over controls and wrap things up with the river south.
There we go. All right. Thanks, Bill. Okay, here we go. The River South District is located south of the Kansas River, generally between Topeka Boulevard and Kansas Avenue, south to 2nd Street. We do extend, as Bill mentioned, into the River to Rail District by getting these properties that are along Quincy Street to the east of Kansas Avenue. Some of the old warehouse buildings over there. I want to mention that this River South planning process has been led by Stantec. Stantec is our brownfields assessment grant consultant. So there was funding available through that grant to do some reuse planning. So this is the plan they're working on. Most recently led a virtual phase 3, which was to get comments on public and open spaces. And some of that information you will see in this presentation. So the brand for the River South District is that it be an innovation district. So we're talking about this district being an area for economic development, entrepreneur growth, river access, an eclectic mix of old and new buildings. This area should be the gritty, walkable setting to accommodate ag tech, animal sciences, or other collaborative research. So really a district that won't really compete with other districts. Downtown will be more of a complement and have its own sort of economic development going on within the district. Some of the images you see on the left are examples of the types of things that we'll be talking about here with the river, the open space, and the innovation district. So what is an innovation district? So if you look at the context of an innovation district with the River South District, we're talking about retaining these existing character, but also promoting new infill construction that attracts reinvestment and diversity in the local economy. There's some key ingredients for an innovation district. So it's the economic assets, the physical assets, and the networking assets. And really what we're going to be looking at in this presentation are the physical assets that the district has to offer. This is the concept for River South, the development concept, and there's really 4 things to point out here. The first is the new construction. So the new construction is in blue on this map. I'll highlight the new construction that's along the river and also the west of the Topeka Boulevard Bridge. This is land that the city owns or Metro. Bill mentioned Metro is looking at moving off of the river. So this is the land that is essentially land banked, for lack of a better term, by the city in this area, which makes exercising this vision a little more realistic. You've also got new buildings on some of the more underutilized properties within the district. This concept also points out that there are iconic buildings within the district. So we'll see pictures of these on the last slide, but there are some iconic buildings, the smokestack building here, and then the ice building over here that's immediately west or east of the Kansas Avenue Bridge. So ultimately these buildings we'd see those being redeveloped either for funky commercial or mixed use type developments, residential type developments. The concept also shows open space along the river. So that's this area to the north, north of Crane. And then also some treatments for the Polk Quincy Viaduct. So we'll zoom into these areas. So this is a little closer look at the open space concept for this development. Again, you've got the two new buildings that are bookending the open space. And you've got sort of a flexible open space here that can be used by the office buildings here or by the public at large. This concept pushes the open space out into the river farther with a platform. So this will allow some viewing of upstream and downstream and kind of connects this area a little closer to the north. And then also the existing levee trails are noted on this concept and also how they connect to the sidewalk system within the district. The next thing to talk about is the Polk Quincy Viaduct space. So typically the area underneath a viaduct is a forgotten space. It's not very attractive. There isn't much going on. This proposal would create some park space under the viaducts or activate that space under the viaduct to improve the connections to the north. As you come under this viaduct, there'll be things going on underneath that bridge. Also, as Bill mentioned, by not having the frontage road go through here, we open up some potential development land by using First Street as the frontage road, so to speak. So this proposal notes that there is some new construction within these sort of remnant parcels, but also some additional park space. We were very fortunate to get some 3D perspectives from Stantec for this area. So this perspective shows the view from the new Polk Quincy Viaduct north towards the river. And what this perspective helps to show is the scale of the new buildings. Also the streetscape treatments that are proposed by Stantec. So sidewalks and street trees and those sorts of things to create more quality public open space within the district. This particular perspective is looking south from the river. So here you can see the platform that extends into the river. And again, the scale of these buildings that are along the river, trying to get some good density, some good urbanization, and try to get these buildings up over the levee so they can take advantage of the river views. When Polk Quincy is finished, Van Buren Street will actually go under that bridge and go and connect all the way to the Capitol. So now as this district develops, you'll have a straight shot back to the Capitol. And what the idea here is to create a very pedestrian friendly realm. So it's very easy to walk from this area through our Van Buren district and get to the Capitol. As Bill mentioned, so First Street would be open and access to this district would come through First Street. So this is First in Kansas. As we look south again, back towards downtown, we've got a good pedestrian realm going back that way. And if you know, just knowing that the treatment that was done on Kansas Avenue between 6th and 10th will be continued north down Kansas Avenue all the way to the River South District. So finally, these are some of the cool buildings. The idea here again is to keep this area gritty by including some housing, industrial uses, rehabs for new technology. You've got an existing warehouse building that was recently converted to residential. That's the kind of thing that this district is looking for, those kind of real interesting conversions and interesting uses of buildings in the future. So let's see, with that, that's it.
Okay, thanks, Dan. I'll conclude Dan's remarks by touching on kind of a little bit of the history of that area from a planning perspective. I think, Dan, it was the late 2000s. I'm sorry, it was about 2008, roughly 2009, maybe, when there was another original plan done for the riverfront by Sasaki Associates. And that, if any of you remember or were here, showed a much large-scale redevelopment, pretty much wholesale redevelopment of that area. Everything, it was, again, it was right before the recession, and there was a lot of grand ideas of build out and really removing the industrial character that Dan showed you would try to be preserved down there now. Baseball stadiums or conventions centers, just large scale redevelopment. And I do know that the plan that we're showing you here would not be to anywhere near that scale. And the reason that's somewhat germane is the whole Quincy Viaduct, when those designs were done, based a lot of their circulation and their road capacity in this area on that old plan that envisioned a series of much bigger, I guess, developments and usage than what we just showed you, which are still pretty sizable in themselves. So we think there's a little more of a hybrid here, with able to use the existing grid and area, as well as introduce some new uses and new infill if we could relocate some of the public uses along the riverfront and really get the community back engaged into this area like they've never have been before. It's a bit of a forgotten area, has tremendous opportunity. And we don't want it to compete necessarily with, again, NOTO or the historic district in the core of downtown. And so the innovation district is something that has come up as a pretty viable use, particularly when you consider plug and play being part of this community now, bringing entrepreneurs here every 6 months for the ag, tech, and animal health industries and corridor that we're connected to, and whether or not we would be able to keep a young company that's growing here in Topeka. Well, we want to be able to envision a campus or district where creativity and collaboration can be maximized. So that district along the riverfront is one of two areas, I think, that our economic development folks with Go Topeka are currently looking at for that type of a campus for an innovation district. With that said, so it is a bit of a departure, a little bit of a departure from 10, 12 years ago in that previous planning effort. We're probably going to be, and we're working with the Riverfront Authority and their committee, as well as the property owners in that area. And I think Stantec owes us either one more visit or one more presentation after, I think we received, Dan, what, over 50 comments on this?
Yeah, on our story map that we had out earlier in May and June, yeah, we had over 50 comments on that.
So we have to sit down with them and look at those and see if there's any changes, suggestions for this area. And that's a good place to probably park it here and wind it up because we are again, in addition to just keeping you in the loop, we do want you to feel like you can ask any questions or make any comments on these drafts as you see them coming through. So with that, I will stand for any questions or comments from the commission.
Yeah, I have a question, if I may, Mark Freed. So we have these like large buildings on the riverfront and kind of this big development on the west side of Topeka and the river south area. Are those all envisioned to be businesses, commercial, as opposed to any hotels or anything like that?
Yeah, the buildings that were on there that would replace some of the city facilities, those are shown to be workplaces, not necessarily hotels or new residential. They are research and office and lab and at least above the ground floor. The ground floor might be more of a, could be more of a retail. When I say retail, more of a, a cafe here, a coffee shop here or there, a brewery here or there. Housing actually could be an element of some of these buildings, but yeah, when you look at that, I look at those bigger ones. I think those could be some landing spots for a headquarters or a lab or research facility.
And to continue, the reason I ask is it seemed that what I heard, part of the idea was to kind of make this a place for people to be able to use in a recreational kind of way, the riverfront area. And I don't know if, but I'm looking here and I see, so where are people going to park? I mean, is it, and what's there to do recreationally other than to walk around, and we kind of have that overlook. So that seems to be a significant change, at least from what I've heard described in the past.
Yeah, I mean, this isn't just a place that's going to be for private use only. It's the shared green space is exactly that. Between the ideas to have, and I think there was a picture from, I think it was from Minnesota. There was a brewery that opened onto a green space that really was open for events to the public that then just transitioned into the trail on the levee and into the riverfront overlook. And so it was intended that there's some overlapping use here. It's not just a private, it's not just a park. It is really to be used in overlapping ways, much like some of the other districts we saw. So I think that's one of the key ingredients, is to have a physical space that isn't just a private space. It is indeed a public space. We just don't have anything like that really. And it's hard to create in an urban environment and have some of these amenities that are around you. I mean, you literally have a nature area just to the west of this area, and then along the river, yet you have an industry, you have an industrial feel for the area as well. So I think it's intended to really blend a lot of interests here and not be just a private, it won't succeed if it's that. So it's kind of a new economic development model, if you will. And it's more of an urban model. We don't have a lot of land that is just assembled in a way that has these amenities and access together. So that's why I think it has some traction with economic development folks right now.
Okay, I still wonder if we're going to have this where the public can come use, and I get the mix of the public and the private and all that. I don't know where the public gets there when there's, it's not public areas, it's private areas. Unless we're expecting everybody to walk down from 4 blocks away, or that's just my initial sense of it.
I think one idea, there isn't going to be round the clock need for parking. So there's no sense in having surface parking dedicated or structured parking for the public down there. So on-street parking will be the main supply, but when you do have a community event that you do need that extra potential space, that's what we want to create some pervious surfaces back where the Polk Quincy space is that could potentially have overflow parking if need be, but not have it just an asphalt 7 days a week, that this could be a green overflow shared parking if you need it. So so to answer your question, there would be some walking from block to block. There would be some bike connections across the bridge. It wouldn't be, but it could be set up for that one-time bigger event as well.
Okay, well, thanks. Yeah, I didn't understand the park space under the viaduct was intended to maybe kind of be a multi-use for parking as well. That makes sense to me.
Mr. Finder, I really like the designs. I think kind of on the same path is, I would say just mild concern over if it's too much industry. I know we're going for like mild industry, but is if we have cafes go in there, I could envision them having really short hours, kind of like on Kansas where they're closing at 6 p.m. or they're not open on weekends or they take Sundays off. So I could see that, maybe not thriving or just not being a good location for a cafe unless they do really good like lunch business, but maybe finding ways to incorporate like the farmers market moving down there. I feel like that would help get some people drawing their attention to the area and then knowing to come back because it's really nice. And if things are open on the weekend, not just to serve the industry that moves in there, I think would be important. I think having housing there also helps because if they live there or if a grocery store is there, they're walking through it or they're, hanging out and staying in it. So other businesses are willing to stay open on the weekends.
Good point. All thoughts that I think you hit on. There's a balance here between having it be you want some reasons and destinations to go to in the area, but you don't want, and you want it mixed use, but you don't want to have this compete so much with what is turning out to be a where we see a lot of the new housing happening. I'm not saying there wouldn't be housing down here. It would just be more of a complementary, not a new neighborhood per se, because a lot of what we've heard is people want to be around the activity, and a lot of that activity, at least right now, and could be and is further south in our historic district around the Kansas Avenue, around in the radius of the plaza and the Capitol. So that's where a lot of the housing opportunities would be in this plan. But that's not to say, in fact, we definitely would think there are some in this River South area. You need that. You absolutely need folks to be there around the clock, and it wouldn't work very well. We think that would be a natural attraction to people working in the area, let alone people that don't work there. So yes, in a complementary way, the farmers market, the just events to get folks activated down along the river, which is really hard to do right now. So yeah, those are good points. Thank you.
Mr. Tyner?
Yes.
Mr. Messina mentioned about grocery stores, which brought up the idea. Is there any places in any of these districts where there has been identified maybe a good place where grocery type businesses would be a good idea, or would have space for that?
Commissioner Ringler, you asked about grocery stores? You were breaking up.
Cut out.
Okay, I'm going to answer. I think that's what you asked. Yes, there is a.
Sorry.
Dan, help me. The district.
I was asking about grocery stores.
The district that is most likely for that would be something closer to where our residential would be, or the concentration of residential, which is probably in the 6th Street area. Also because of that street being a fairly busy arterial with a lot of access. And I think that was in our Van Buren district, or close to Van Buren and 6th. Let's put it Van Buren 6th, Jackson 6th, Harrison 6th, somewhere along there that's in walking distance to the residential, and is also could be our more central to downtown. Needs a bigger footprint than just your typical infill site. But I have some illustrations that I'll show you next time that we do this presentation, because I think Van Buren would be, I think Van Buren, we haven't showed you. That would be one of the next districts. We only have 2 left to show you before we put a wrap on the draft and put the document together. So yes, that's kind of the area that we're looking at.
I guess I got one comment to Bill and Dan and your team. I really like the district and hubs concept. I think we've kind of seen something similar on our last couple of intercity visits with the partnership of being in a downtown in one area, and they point to another district where something cool is going on, or another district if you wanted to shop or get something else unique. And I really like separating these into more concise areas that you can kind of define a little better and fit with the existing infrastructure a little better. And I think it'll be really cool if it grows in those directions, and we can start using that nomenclature and get used to that pattern.
Yeah, we have had some inspirations in some of those inner city visits. And I will, I'll caution everybody, those illustrations are full build outs. Those are, as planners, we're thinking about tomorrow. We're not necessarily, and that doesn't necessarily mean, Tuesday. That means reimagining an area and giving someone a picture to stretch that thinking, and so that you could have an influence on something that will have will be there decades to come, and that and we're aware of that. I mean, but what we try and do. We try and build out the area. We have a market-based approach for the first 10 years that we try to show, okay, here's where the 10-year demand is, but then we have that more aspirational view and the build-out view, and so folks can kind of see, oh, okay, that's what it could look like. That's what you're talking about. That's the vision, and it's yeah, we're definitely inspired by other places, but we want to show a build-out that just for that type of thinking of thinking about short-term decisions we need to make today for that long-term plan.
Hey, Bill, what's the Polk Quincy Viaduct? What's the timeline when that might get started construction? And also, what's happening in between when they're building it? How is traffic getting around that? I'm assuming you have to route traffic around at some point.
Yeah, and Brian, jump in if you need to here. The construction is, it really is undetermined right now. We are hoping, based on if everything, we update our design in the next year, we will get, I know we're going to try to apply for some potential grant money. So hopefully all this comes together. You could have something starting here in the next 5 years. It just takes at a minimum, a couple years, because you've got to do right of way and you've got to do utilities and whatnot. So, I keep saying kind of a 5-year horizon. We would hope to expect to see something. We could even be going out and doing some soft work with the right of way now, and you wouldn't see any construction. But we're hoping 5 years, you would see that start, a visible start. And then your other question was, detours. Is that? So again. Brian, wouldn't they keep the main line in place as long as they could and try to build the new route around it?
Yeah, you would try to build the new viaducts, which are an offset alignment from the existing, and keep I-70 open. You can do all of that probably. There's going to be a time after that, though, to connect I-70 to the new viaducts that, yeah, there could be some more impactful closures and detours. Yet to be determined how you would reroute or encourage people to use downtown streets to get through downtown instead of I-70.
So I guess, would that mean that nothing would be done on the plan until after that? Or would you, what's the thought
on the
that?
land use? Yeah, on the land use?
Right.
I guess it depends a little bit, but no, not necessarily. It doesn't prevent some of the projects from moving forward. I'd say the bigger projects, like we talked about, particularly, let's say we want to do something at 4th and Kansas, that actually has tremendous access to the existing as well as the new viaduct. You know, I could see that maybe paralleling, but the timeline of Polk Quincy, so that when things are done, it can be opened up. That's a good question. I don't. It's one of the reasons we want to get Polk Quincy started, is because some people and businesses and investment they are going to hold back, and so that's a real concern, that with this kind of de facto cloud hanging over the area. Yeah, I would agree. Some things would have to be. I will say some of that River South stuff. I don't think it would be totally impacted, though. I mean, we're going to have to relocate facilities down there, and that can be going on. So there's a lot of work before any Polk Quincy construction is done that's appropriate. So we're doing all the planning work, doing all the pre-development work, but I don't think that's going to preclude from some of those uses going down there right away. But I know like Topeka Foundry, for instance, they just got an incentive to expand their business at 3rd and Jackson. I don't know if they would. I don't think they're really concerned about waiting. But some folks that are coming maybe from an investment from the outside might see that differently.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments, commissioners? All right, Dan and Bill, appreciate the updated information this evening. Looking forward to the Van Buren and other areas in the future. Bill, I think we just have communications to the commission left on our agenda this evening.
Yeah, I don't. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't have any real updates. The one conditional use permit got approved that you had last month, which was the Grand Jefferson Pump Station. So that was approved. I don't think there is anything else. I know we have. I think there's one case for July. I think, if I'm not mistaken. So we'll see if that stays on there or not. We are still, just so you know, we're still working behind the scenes with the Sports Zone application, and we've met with their attorney on some new proposals. So we're still working through some things that so they can come back to you, but I don't think it'll be ready next month.
If we do have a public hearing, would that be in chambers?
Yeah, I'm looking at the date. I think we're probably going to be able to do that. Let's see what the agenda is. It may not be worth pulling everybody together for one item, depending on what it is. We'll see if we get any feedback from the neighborhood or anything like that. But at this point, I think the case is, I think it's a public utility. I think it's a expansion of a substation, another similar case to the one you saw last month. So we'll keep folks posted. If you don't mind, we don't need to bring you all together necessarily if we can continue to do this in a proper way that and citizens can still be part of this, we'll keep we'll keep that on the table.
All right, thank you. Motion to adjourn, anyone? Mark moves that we adjourn, and he's the attorney, so we are adjourned. Thanks, everyone.
Night.
Thank you.
All right.